My name is Ava Carter, and until the day of my college graduation, I thought I understood what betrayal felt like. I've always been the type to keep my head down, work hard, and stay out of drama. I wasn't the loud one at parties, the most popular girl on campus, or the kind of person who chased attention. I was just focused. I'd grown up in a small town in Oregon raised by two teachers who valued honesty education and family loyalty above all else. My older sister Natalie, though we were different, we always had this quiet tension between us. She was beautiful, magnetic, the one everyone looked at when she entered a room. And for a long time, I didn't mind living in her shadow. I was okay with being the quiet achiever. But what I didn't know was how deep her resentment ran and how far she'd go to tear me down when she thought the spotlight was finally mine. Graduation day was supposed to be the best day of my life. I had earned it 4 years of late nights balancing two part-time jobs, internships, and relentless studying. I wasn't just graduating, I was graduating top of my class, with a research paper that had already been cited by a national journal. My professors respected me. I'd been offered a position in a graduate program months before the ceremony. My parents were beyond proud. And that day I stood backstage waiting for my name to be called, feeling something I rarely let myself feel: pride. Real, glowing, earned pride. I spotted my family in the crowd, my parents beaming, and right next to them Natalie. Her arms crossed, sunglasses on, even indoors, expression unreadable. I tried to ignore it. I wanted to believe that for once she'd just let me have my moment. But as I began walking across the stage, something happened that changed everything. Ava cheated. The words cut through the auditorium like a blade. People gasped, heads turned, and for a second the world just stopped. I froze mid-step, my name still echoing over the speakers as hundreds of eyes stared at me in stunned silence. I looked up, and there she was, Natalie, standing up in the middle of the crowd, pointing at me, her voice loud and clear. She plagiarized her final paper. She didn't earn that degree. For a moment, I thought it was some twisted joke. Maybe she thought she was being funny. Maybe it was just a prank. An awful, humiliating prank. But when I looked at her face, I saw something else entirely. Cold, serious, intentional. And I realized this wasn't a prank. This was a plan. Security didn't rush me off the stage. No one pulled me away. But the damage was already done. The entire audience was buzzing, whispering, murmuring. My parents were frozen in disbelief. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But instead, I just kept walking, every step heavier than the last, until I reached the college. President took my diploma with trembling hands and exited the stage without looking back. What followed was chaos. I wasn't arrested, but the university announced that an internal review would begin immediately. They suspended my academic record pending investigation. My job offer was withdrawn within 24 hours. I was told not to attend graduate orientation. I couldn't believe what was happening. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't plagiarized a single word. Everything in that paper was mine. I had drafts, emails, citations. But none of that mattered at first, because Natalie had planted a seed, and once people heard it, they couldn't unhear it. I confronted her that night, standing in our parents' living room as they sat stunned on the couch. "Why did you do it?" I asked, shaking, tears streaming down my face. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just shrugged and said, "Because you always get what you want, and I was tired of watching you win." And that was the moment everything broke. What hurt more than the accusation was realizing it wasn't random. It was personal, deliberate. She had watched me struggle, fight for every inch, and when I finally got to the top, she decided I didn't deserve it. That I needed to be torn down publicly, brutally, and permanently. But what Natalie didn't know was that I wasn't going to stay broken. I wasn't going to accept the lie she created. And I certainly wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. Because this is not a story about a girl who was humiliated. It's a story about a woman who stood back up and fought like hell to get her life back. I didn't sleep that night. The moment I got home, I pulled out every saved draft of my research paper, every email I had sent to my advisor, every revision I'd made in Google Docs. I organized screenshots, backed up my files, and highlighted every timestamp that proved the work was mine. I wasn't going to let Natalie's lie become the truth. The next morning, I walked straight into the university's academic affairs office, holding a thick folder in my hands. The staff looked uncomfortable as I explained my case, but I stayed calm. I didn't raise my voice. I simply asked for a fair review. That was all I wanted, just the chance to show them the truth. They told me it could take weeks, that they'd need to involve the plagiarism committee, IT faculty, legal. I nodded. I told them I wasn't going anywhere. I'd wait. While I waited, everything else fell apart. My inbox filled with silence, no replies from employers, no outreach from professors. Some classmates who used to wave across campus now avoided my eyes. One even unfollowed me on social media. I became a ghost in a life I had built with so much care. And at home, things weren't much better. My parents were confused, heartbroken. My mom believed me, but she didn't understand why Natalie would lie. My dad said there must have been a misunderstanding, but there wasn't. Natalie knew exactly what she was doing, and when I passed her in the hallway, she didn't even blink. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the university. They had finished the digital audit. Every single file confirmed my version of events. My paper had been written over the course of 3 months with consistent edits saved from my personal account from my laptop, with geolocation data to match. The committee unanimously agreed there was zero evidence of plagiarism. My suspension was lifted immediately, and I was cleared of all accusations. But the damage didn't just disappear. I still had to call my job offer back and ask them to reconsider. I still had to send awkward emails to professors trying to re-establish trust. And I still had to walk around a campus where everyone had seen my sister accuse me in public. Vindication doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like starting over. What I didn't expect was the second email that came that same afternoon from the university's IT department. They had discovered something strange. An attempt had been made about a week before graduation to access my student portal using a different IP address. Whoever it was had tried to download and modify my research files, but failed to get in. The university flagged the attempt as suspicious and reported it to campus security. When I asked them to trace the IP, the answer made my blood run cold. It was Natalie's. I took that information and went straight to the dean. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama. But this wasn't just a personal fight anymore, this was academic fraud. She had tried to access and alter official files to sabotage me. That wasn't a sibling rivalry. That was a crime. The university launched a formal investigation. Natalie was called in. I wasn't allowed in the room, but I heard later that she denied everything until she was shown the login attempts. Her story fell apart. She admitted to it finally, but said it was just a joke that went too far. No one laughed. They suspended her immediately for breach of student conduct, and later she withdrew from the program entirely. I wish I could say I felt better after that. But the truth is, there was no joy in watching my sister self-destruct. I didn't want her expelled. I wanted her to care. I wanted her to see me not as competition, not as someone to beat, but as her sister. But that moment never came. She left town without saying goodbye, and I was left in the silence she created. Still, something shifted in me. For the first time, I wasn't living in reaction to her anymore. I was finally standing on my own with the truth behind me, and a future that, despite everything, was still mine to claim. That summer, I stayed in our hometown longer than I planned. I thought I needed to escape everything fast, to move out, to start over, but part of me needed time to breathe, to think. Most of all, I needed to feel like I belonged somewhere again. The house felt different without Natalie, quieter, less tense. My mom walked around like she was holding broken glass, trying to make sense of the pieces. My dad still clung to hope, saying things like, "She'll come around," or "maybe it was stress." but I didn't respond anymore. I had no more energy to explain what they didn't want to see. I didn't hate my sister, but I couldn't carry the weight of her actions on my back forever. I started volunteering at the local library while waiting for the new semester to begin. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. Something about sorting books and helping kids with their summer reading lists reminded me who I was before all of this happened. The girl who loved stories. The girl who believed in effort and fairness in showing up. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. And then one day, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. Handwritten. From Natalie. She didn't say sorry. Not really. But she wrote about how everything had gotten out of control. How she felt like she was always second best, even though she was the one people saw as perfect. She wrote that she had watched me quietly succeed, and instead of being proud, she'd felt invisible. It didn't justify what she did, not even close. But it gave me a glimpse into her mind, into the pain she had never spoken out loud. The letter ended with a single line. I hope you're doing okay. I folded it and put it away in my drawer. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I wasn't angry anymore either. I was just tired. In August, the university confirmed that my scholarship would remain untouched, and my full academic record would be reinstated. It felt like the first real win in months. My old advisor reached out and asked if I'd like to rejoin the research team in the fall. I said yes. Not because I wanted to prove anything, but because I missed the work. I missed feeling part of something meaningful. I also got a call from the internship coordinator who had previously ghosted me. They had heard about what happened through the university channels and wanted to meet again. It was awkward, but we talked, honestly. I told them I understood if they'd already moved on, but they surprised me. They said, "We admire how you handled it. You didn't burn anything down, you stood your ground." And just like that, I got a second chance. Things didn't go back to normal because I wasn't the same person anymore. I didn't laugh as easily or trust as quickly. But I was clearer, stronger. I stopped waiting for people to validate me. I stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. I started showing up as myself fully and unapologetically. And in doing that, I found people who respected me not just for my grades or my resume, but for how I carried myself when things got hard. At one point during orientation for the new research cohort, a freshman approached me. She said she'd read about my case in a student blog and asked, "How did you not give up?" I didn't have a perfect answer. I told her the truth, because if I didn't stand up for myself, who else would? She smiled and nodded, like that made sense. And in that moment, I realized something. My story, the mess of it, the pain of it, had become something useful. Something someone else could lean on. That made it all feel a little more worth it. By the time the fall semester started, I had moved into a new apartment, set up my desk, and printed out my class schedule. It felt like a fresh page. Not clean, because life never really gives you a blank slate, but fresh enough. Enough to move forward. Enough to rebuild. Enough to be proud of where I'd landed, even if the journey there had been anything but smooth. A few weeks into the semester, I got an unexpected email. It was from a journalist working on a story about digital sabotage and academic fraud. She said someone from the university had tipped her off about my case and asked if I'd be willing to talk. At first I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay quiet to leave the whole nightmare behind and just focus on moving forward. But another part of me, the one that had spent sleepless nights wondering how many other people had gone through something similar, knew this wasn't just about me anymore. So I said yes. We met at a quiet coffee shop off campus. She listened carefully as I told her everything, how the cheating accusations started the investigation, the evidence I found, and how the truth finally came out. I left out certain details about Natalie. I didn't want this to be about revenge. I just wanted the truth to matter. When the article was published a month later, I was stunned by the response. My inbox filled with messages from students around the country, some thanking me for speaking up, others sharing their own stories of being falsely accused or betrayed by people they trusted. It was overwhelming, but it also made me feel less alone. I wasn't the only one who'd been silenced. I wasn't the only one who'd had to claw her way back. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud not just of surviving, but of helping others feel seen. Around that same time, my relationship with my parents started to shift. My mom and I had long, tearful conversations that were messy and uncomfortable but real. She admitted she'd believed Natalie because it had been easier than facing the idea that her golden child was capable of something cruel. My dad apologized for staying quiet, for trying to keep the peace instead of standing up for the truth. I didn't let them off the hook right away. But I listened, and slowly the walls between us began to crack. Natalie, though, stayed distant. Aside from that one letter, she didn't reach out again. I heard she had transferred schools and was living with an aunt out of state. I didn't chase her. I didn't need closure in the way I thought I did. Sometimes the door doesn't close with a final conversation. Sometimes it just stays open enough to remind you that healing doesn't always include reconciliation. And that's okay. As the semester rolled on, I focused on my classes, my research, and the quiet joy of rebuilding something that had once felt shattered. I made new friends, not the kind who needed me to shrink or hide my accomplishments, but the kind who celebrated them. I learned how to trust myself again, to laugh without watching my back, to wake up without that heavy knot in my chest. It wasn't always easy, and there were still days when the past tugged at me, but they came less often. One night, while preparing for a presentation, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. Not the physical kind, but the deeper kind. The kind that comes when you realize just how far you've come. I remembered the girl who stood alone on that stage at graduation, feeling humiliated and betrayed, and I realized I didn't feel like her anymore. I wasn't her anymore. That version of me had broken, yes, but she had also chosen to stand up, to speak out, to keep going. And because of that, I was here. Still standing, still rising. Not in spite of what happened, but because of it. That's something no one could ever take from me. That spring, I was invited to speak at a student panel on academic integrity. It wasn't a big event, just a gathering in one of the smaller auditoriums. But when I walked up to the podium and saw all those faces looking back at me, I felt something shift. This time I wasn't standing there to defend myself. I was standing there because my voice mattered. I talked about what I'd been through, not in a bitter or dramatic way, but in an honest one. I told them how easily trust can be broken, how quickly people can turn on you, and how lonely it feels when you're forced to prove your innocence. But I also shared how powerful it can be to fight for yourself, even when no one else does. Afterward, a girl came up to me with tears in her eyes. She said her roommate had plagiarized her work and blamed her, and no one had believed her either. She'd almost dropped out. But after hearing my story, she was thinking about staying. That moment hit me hard. It reminded me why speaking up matters, not for recognition, not for revenge, but so someone else can feel a little less alone. That summer, I started working with a nonprofit that helps students navigate academic disputes. It felt right, like turning pain into purpose. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just someone who knew what it felt like to be unheard. If I could help even one person feel seen, that was enough. I also started writing more essays, personal reflections, even a draft of a book. Putting my experience into words helped me make sense of it, helped me understand how deeply it had shaped me. Not just in the ways it hurt, but in the ways it taught me to rise. One day, while cleaning out some old boxes, I found a photo from high school. Natalie and me, arms around each other, smiling like nothing could touch us. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just sat with it for a moment, remembering who we were, and knowing that who we are now doesn't erase that. People change, bonds break. But sometimes, the most painful cracks are the ones that let the light in. In the end, Ava's journey wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about rediscovering her strength and learning that family doesn't always mean loyalty. She faced betrayal from the one person she trusted most and stood alone in the darkest moment of her life. But instead of breaking, she rose. Through her courage, she reclaimed her future, and in doing so became a voice for others who've been wronged in silence. This story reminds us that even when trust is shattered, we still have the power to stand tall, to speak up, and to rebuild. If you've ever felt dismissed, betrayed, or unheard, know this: your truth matters. Your voice matters. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep going even when no one believes you.